Hello, I'm Jazz Rose, author of Teaching Primary PE, and I'm here today to talk about effective transitions in PE. What if I told you that you could potentially save 9,750 minutes of teaching time through delivering effective transitions? You'd probably think I was crazy. How did I come up with that sum? Let me explain. First, let me start with what we commonly see in PE lessons or in sports lessons, which is the teacher does the warm-up and then the children's hearts are racing, they're ready for the next activity, and then they come in, they sit down, they go through the learning objectives. Sometimes it's done before, sometimes it's done just after the warm-up, and then they go through the explanation of the next task. Then they have to model the next task. Then they talk about giving out bibs for the next task if they want to get pupils into a 1v1 later on or some sort of activity where they collaborate. And then they have to give out the equipment. All of this takes time. A friend of mine sent me a lovely picture the other day, and the caption of a teacher giving out a ball 1v1, all the children sitting beautifully in a line, waiting patiently for the ball to come to them. And he said this person needs some Jazz Rose advice, needs some Jazz Rose guidance on effective transitions. So that was really what spurred this video here today, and I want to really talk about that and how we can maximize pupil progress through really effective transitions. A typical transition might take up to 5 minutes. Typically we might have 2 key transitions in a lesson. That's 10 minutes. We multiply that by 5 PE lessons in a typical school day, multiply that by 5 days in a typical school week, multiply that by 39 weeks of an academic year, you could actually save 9,750 minutes of teaching time. Or if you're not doing effective transitions swiftly, you're potentially wasting that time. That's the equivalent of 32 and a half days, just to give that a little bit of perspective. So I guess you're wondering, so what should an effective transition look like? What should I do? How can I make sure I maximize pupil progress and learning and take them through that learning journey so that there's continual learning throughout? Well, I'm going to introduce you to 2 key methods today. Now, let's say we have a scenario where we're teaching Key Stage 2 or Year 5 to be specific, and we're teaching dribbling with control and speed, progressing to a 1v1 activity. What does it look like? You have red cones on the left-hand side, you have blue cones on the right-hand side, and then you have your perimeter around the grid. You do a classic warm-up, and the children are jogging around in the space and they're listening to instructions. Whatever you want them to do with the ball later on as part of your acquire stage, as part of your skill development stage, you want to build that in where possible to the warm-up so that the pupils are already aware of the routine, and the warm-up is intrinsically linked to the acquire, to the development stage of your lesson. You also want to make sure that you have balls on top of the cone. So you have balls on top of the cones on this side and on this side and all around the perimeter. Behind each of the cones on the red side, behind each of the cones on the blue side, you want to have blue cones on the right, blue bibs on the right, red bibs behind the cones on the left. And I'm going to show you why this is magnificently important in a moment. So the pupils are practicing these skills, changes of direction, increases of speed, because again, they're going to practice all of these skills when you give them the ball. So you want to make sure that they can change direction well. You want to make sure that they can respond to instructions about increasing speed. So when they get the basketball, when they get the equipment in their hands, it doesn't come as a complete shock, and it's a continuation of the learning journey. I like to play a game called speed or pace, or you might call it different things. I've heard some people call it Sonic, because Sonic's really fast and it's just about increasing speed. So you're traveling around the stage, you shout speed or pace, children sprint out to a cone as fast as they can. You remind pupils, if someone's at one of the cones, what do you think you should do? Look for another one, sir. Fantastic. And then all the children are standing behind the ball, and you might introduce new layers of instructions on this depending on the skill level, ability of your pupils, what you've done in the past. You might want to introduce something simple like legs apart, hands on hips, so that pupils are ready for the next instruction. You might want to introduce, pick the basketball up, dribble it 5 times in a V dribble. Put it down on the cone, hands on hips, legs apart. Why do I say legs apart? Again, so it's just to get the circulation going through the body. It's just to introduce a light stretch as you progress through the warm-up. And that game there, the great thing about that game, it really allows teachers to transition effectively, because once they're there, once you've done that 2 or 3 times, they're used to that speed routine, you can then say, right, in a moment I'm going to ask you to pick up a basketball, I'm going to ask you to dribble it around the space, I want to see what you remember from last week, how well you can dribble with control and confidence. Off you go. The balls are already there, so there's no time wasted, there's no taking the ball out of a bag one by one, there's nothing like that. It's a continual part of the learning journey. You introduce a key teaching point throughout that, you get the pupils to sit down, you demonstrate, you get certain pupils to model certain things like fingers spread, bent knees, chin up, peripheral vision, looking around for space, so on and so forth, throughout that learning journey or throughout that acquire phase. Let's say a little bit later on in the lesson, you want to introduce that 1v1 activity. So now they've got to get into pairs. How do we do this? Do we do it the old school traditional way where we ask pupils to find a partner, and then sometimes this can take, again, up to 5 minutes, because you've got to remind people how to behave, not to go with their friends, and so on and so forth. You just play a numbers game. I love it. You just play part of the warm-up. When I say number 2, you get into group of 2, jump stop position, facing your partner. If it's football, it might be get into 2, ball on top of the ball, hand on your shoulder, hand on your partner's shoulder, ready for the next instruction. All of these things you can build into part of the learning process. And then when you are ready for them to transition from a single to a paired activity, you can then say, number 2, pupils get into group of 2, right now we're ready. So next time I ask you to get into group of 2, I want a person that's in a red bib to pair up with someone that's in a blue bib. And they have no idea, they probably don't have an idea that you're pairing them together for the next phase of the learning, so they just want to get it done as quickly as possible because you've built that into the routine. So they get with a partner, and then you go red, you go to the red cone, blue, if you go to the blue cone. If you've got a blue ball, I want you to put it on top of the blue cone, and then this is how we're gonna start the next activity. So the blue person might be the passive defender, the red person is gonna dribble towards, and so on and so forth. As you build in the skills, you can then build in the defender to becoming a semi-passive defender, and then to becoming a fully active defender. And then that's your apply stage. That's testing the skills that they've learned in the acquire phase. The fingers spread, peripheral vision, looking for space, dribbling in different directions, increases of speed with the ball. And then you're putting that into the apply phase of the lesson in that 1v1 activity. So those 2 games, again, is pace or speed. They sprint out, they burst as fast as they can to a cone on the outside. The balls are already there, no time is wasted. They can put the bib on, they can get the ball, they can immediately get into the learning journey and developing their core skills. The second one is a numbers game, where you call a number, you get them into that group as quickly as possible. Some of you might be thinking, oh, well, what if I want to get into group of 4 rather than 2? Great, brilliant, and that's great for your differentiation. Let's say 2 pupils are let's say you've got 4 pupils in the class, really doing excellently. Their dribbling skills are magnificent, they're really challenging their opponent and so on and so forth. They've already progressed to active defending. You want to get them into a 4v4, into a 2v2, as opposed to a 1v1. So then you say, right, you 4, I want you to go into a 4v4 situation. The other way you can do it, if you want the whole class to get into a 4v4, you just say groups of 4, or you can just pair up the 2 reds next to each other, the 2 blues next to each other. And again, it's a continual part of the learning journey. I hope you find that extremely useful. I really do want you to go away and practice these transition phases so that you really optimize pupil learning time, and tell me what you think. If it works fantastically well for you, please drop me a comment. I'd love to hear your feedback and how you've implemented it. You might find ways to implement this slightly differently to what I've said. Absolutely fantastic. I want to hear your feedback too. Some of you might find it a little bit challenging. You might find certain routines don't work as well as you'd have liked. Drop me a comment. I'm more than happy to help. I'm more than happy to give some strategic tips and advice where I can. Have a fantastic week of teaching primary PE. I've been Jazz Rose, and I hope you've learned something useful. Feel free to share this video with a friend who might be interested or might pick up something from it. Thanks a lot. Have a great week.